Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a great day so far and welcome to today's video, which is going to be all about the queen, the GOAT, the greatest of all time. Of course, we're talking about Simone Biles. I want to discuss my thoughts and I have a lot of them. I did watch her most recent Netflix documentary. I've been a huge fan for many years of hers. I was watching in Tokyo when we were all absolutely crushed. The Olympics are almost upon us. I could almost touch them. They're so close. And she is one of the most hotly anticipated athletes that we're all very, very excited to see. And she has a very interesting story. So I want to talk about it today. I want to talk about what makes her so special, what makes her so successful, what happened in Tokyo and why, and what I think we're going to see from her in a matter of days' time at the 2024 Olympics. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so for those of you who don't know my background, my previous lives, my day jobs, I'll give you a little bit of an insight as to why I'm so obsessed with sport, why I love talking about sport, and why I know what I know about sport and the entire environment, the Olympics, etc. So I myself was a full-time international swimmer in my previous life before YouTube. That's what I did with a dream of going to the Olympics, which I never did because, well, for many reasons, but the main one being I just wasn't good enough. But obviously I did train as a full-time athlete for very many years of my life and did all international competitions and all of that good stuff, worked with all of the support staff. But then after I retired in around, I think 2005, when I finally pulled the plug, it took me about a year to do so, but around 2005 was when I finally called it quits. I then started working in the Olympic and elite sport environment. So for more than a decade, I worked at the UK Sports Institute, where I supported athletes with their personal and professional development. That was my job, working with them to support their education, their training and qualifications and all that stuff to prepare them for their life after sport. So that was my job. I've worked with many sports, all Olympic, professional, elite level athletes. So I have a huge amount of experience on both sides of sport, both working with, supporting many athletes over the years, as well as being an athlete myself. And my husband also works in the Olympic sport environment. So he worked for many years with the British skeleton team, firstly as a coach and then as their head of performance. He's also worked in talent development. And between us, we have worked with more than, I think, a dozen Olympic sports. So between us, we have a wealth of experience and knowledge of all of these sports, the athletes, what they go through, their training, etc. I have never sadly worked with gymnastics because, and I say sadly, because I just love it. I never did gymnastics as a child. That's not something, a sport I've ever done, but it's always been one of my favorite sports to watch. I just find it so beautiful and I have such a respect. And I'm just so impressed by gymnasts. They are truly one of the most talented, gifted and hardworking sports that there are out there. For me, gymnastics is just one of the most impressive sports. It's not a sport that any of us can do unless you've literally trained at it, you know. You are really either a gymnast or you're not, and very few of us are. You know, anyone can get in a swimming pool and swim if you've had some basic lessons. We can all, you know, put a jog around the track or throw something or, you know, jump a certain amount of distance, but not many people could pull off a vault without breaking their neck. So it really does stand out for me as a sport that is so unbelievably difficult and that you have to be so talented at, gifted, physically at a very young age, and very special and unique to be able to do gymnastics at a super high level. So it's just so impressive to me, but I just love the spectacle of it. It's so amazing to watch. It's so impressive. I've always loved it. Whenever an Olympics comes around, it's always behind swimming, because obviously that's my sport. It's literally the second sport that I'm the most excited to see at any Olympics. I always watch it on TV whenever there's World Championships. It's one of the very few sports that I do really have an interest in outside of my own, outside of just the Olympics. So of course, Simone Biles is one of my favorite athletes ever, because she truly is the greatest there has ever been. But why? Why is she so great? Why is she so special? I want to dig a little deeper. So there is certainly a lot physically about Simone that makes her the absolute ultimate package of a gymnast. So like I said, I'm not a gymnast and I haven't worked directly with gymnastics as one of my sports. So if I say anything technically wrong, bear with me, okay? I'm bound to get some words and phrases wrong because it's not my sport. I just am a big fan. But I have worked with talent ID programs before, and my husband is very, very involved with talent ID. So talent ID, if you're not familiar with the term, is where we assess people, athletes for specific sports. So we actually do huge programs here in the UK. I'm not exactly sure about how these work in other countries, but here in the UK, there are always programs going, particularly in like the winter sports that you don't get to try a lot when you're younger, unless you are a big skier, but some of the more obscure sports, some of the skeleton, the bobsleigh programs, all run regular talent ID programs to try and find the next big star. Someone who's out there, maybe they're doing track and field, maybe they're cycling, maybe they've been a pretty good athlete in another sport, but physically they are perfect for bobsleigh or they're perfect for skeleton. So there are often these talent ID days or events where athletes of a certain level are invited to come and do a load of tests, and they will be assessed and we will find out what sport they're actually perfect for. Physically, their talents, their skills, what they're good at, their body makeup, what sport should they be doing? What sport could they be phenomenal at? So that is a common thing that most nations do, these talent ID, and it looks different depending on the country and the sport that you're looking for, but there's a lot of talent ID. And I feel like Simone, literally, if you were to make a list of attributes that you wanted to make your perfect dream gymnast physically, Simone would be ticking every single box. When you just look at her, obviously we know historically, typically, there are always exceptions to every rule, but typically gymnasts are small. They're petite, they typically have a shorter height than a lot of other sports. Some sports you want to be as tall as possible. Rowing, netball, you want as tall of an athlete as possible for those sports, but gymnastics, typically the athletes are much shorter in stature than your average human. And that is why gymnastics is such a young sport. Again, sports, depending on what sport it is, what the requirements are, what the training looks like, etc., 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 you will see a different sort of average age. Swimming is kind of a young-ish sport, but it's getting an older sport. Track and field typically is an older sport. Netball is an older sport. You can see many netballers playing world champs, playing for their country, still well into their 30s, but you won't see that in gymnastics. Gymnastics is a very young sport. You'll see a lot of teenagers at the Olympics, even 15, 16-year-olds that have been to Olympics and won medals previously. It is a very young sport, and some of it is to do with your growth. You know, the shorter, the smaller that you are as a package as a gymnast, the more typically height and things like that you're able to get. It's all about that weight to power ratio. And essentially in gymnastics, what you want is the smallest, most powerful package you can get. So you fly higher, you have more time in the air, that you have more air time to do as many twists and flips, etc. as possible. The absolute dream gymnast's composition is to be as small and as strong as you possibly can in this perfect little package, this little bundle. That's not to say you can't be slightly taller and be successful. Beth Tweddle, absolutely taller than your average gymnast, but still 5'3". You know, she looks like a giant. When she used to compete, she looks so tall. I always used to think she must be around my height. I'm 5'8", and I'm slightly taller than average. I think average height is around 5'6". So she's still shorter than the average female, but she looks so tall when she was competing against the other gymnasts. Simone Biles is 4'8". She's a teeny tiny petite goddess. But not only is she petite and shorter in stature, she is absolutely shredded. The muscle this woman has is unbelievable. You can see how physically powerful she is, and that is what is so special physically about her, is that she has this really short stature but this unbelievable amount of muscle within that tiny package. She's got the absolute dream ratio when it comes to height, weight, power, muscle. You literally could not have built her on a computer more perfectly for this sport. So undoubtedly a lot of her success comes down to her physical body composition, that package of height, weight, power, etc., alongside all of the training and the work and the physical prep that she has done over years and years. But if she had been, you know, 5'6", 5'7", I truly don't think we'd have seen her be as successful as she is. It's true for a lot of sports. Your physical makeup, the way that you are born, the way your body composition is going to have an impact on how successful you are going to be naturally at a sport. That doesn't mean that you can't train super hard and still be successful if you weren't born the exact perfect height and body composition for a specific sport, but she undoubtedly was physically made for gymnastics. I imagine she wouldn't have been so successful if the sport she decided that she wanted to do had been rowing or basketball. You see what I'm saying? But what I want to talk about next is Simone's mentality. I find this area of sport and looking at why athletes are so successful absolutely fascinating. And years ago now, when I was back in my day job working in sport, I went to a conference, right, with my colleague, and some of our psychology colleagues presented a study that they had been doing looking at the difference between an elite athlete and a super elite athlete, and how we sort of made that distinction. So an elite athlete would be someone who is in the top couple of percent in the world. So that is an elite athlete who, you know, is a full-time international athlete. They qualify for the Olympic Games. Maybe they even win an Olympic medal. And that is an elite athlete. That's the athletes that I used to work with. That's the athletes that make up the program that we work with here in the UK and across the world. However, the super elite athletes, we're talking, these are the Simone Biles, the Michael Phelps, Tiger Woods, Katie Ledecky. So although the elite athletes are phenomenal, amazing creme de la creme athletes, the super elite athletes, these are the game changers, the athletes who have been to multiple Olympic Games, multiple Olympic champions, multiple Olympic gold medals, world records. These are like the absolute top of the top. So not just an Olympian, but a multiple time Olympic champion, world record holder, game changer. You see what I'm saying? That difference. So these group of psychologists I used to work with, they did a study and they interviewed many athletes, and they asked all sorts of questions and did all sorts of tests and all of this good stuff, and they were trying to find out what takes you from like a one-time Olympic qualifying, maybe snatched a bronze, to these Usain Bolts of the world, these Simone Biles. What takes you from like any other Olympian to an absolute game-changing GOAT? What is the difference? Is there something that we commonly see among these super elite athletes that we can learn from? And what they found, which was so mind-blowing to me, is that there is a very frequent occurrence among these super elite athletes of some kind of childhood trauma. So whether that be something really terrible that happened to them as a child, whether they grew up in extreme poverty, whether they had a really tough upbringing, some kind of childhood trauma early on in their life was a really frequent occurrence among these super elite athletes. And that was so interesting to me. What does it mean? Why does it mean that they end up having this edge because of something that's happened in their childhood that's really been very difficult, Why would that be? And there was so much to unpack among this. But when we look at Simone Biles' background and her childhood, she absolutely fits into that bracket. So Simone was born in 1997, 14th of March 1997. She's currently 27 years old. She was the third of 4 siblings, and unfortunately her biological mother could not look after her children. She struggled with alcohol and substance abuse, and all 4 of her children ended up in foster care. And Simone spent the first few years of her life in and out of foster care until eventually, when she was 3, she never knew her father. I think he has been named, but she has never met him or had a relationship with him, and she doesn't really have any kind of relationship with her biological mother. But when she was 3, her maternal grandfather went and got her and her siblings out of foster care and said, I want to take care of them. I want to look after these children. And he took in Simone and her younger sister. And then his sister took in the 2 older siblings. So they still stayed with their family members and they all stayed having a relationship together, but they were now back safe with their family members being looked after. And 3 years later, when she was 6, he officially adopted Simone. And she has just always known him and his wife as her mum and dad. So she did undoubtedly have a very traumatic, a very tough start to life, and then she ended up with this really loving family unit. But undoubtedly she fits into the bracket of having some kind of childhood trauma or rough childhood upbringing, particularly just in those early years. So that's really intriguing. Simone also has ADHD. Do you know who else has ADHD? Michael Phelps. Again, kind of fits into that childhood struggle earlier on in life when he's trying to find his way and he's finding things like school very, very difficult. And then boom, he found swimming. And age 6, Simone found gymnastics by such a freak occurrence as well. So Simone went on like a day trip with her childcare group and just had a go at gymnastics. And the coaches there immediately took one look at her and said, we need you to come back. A bit of talent ID going on there, and fair play to whoever spotted her. And she never looked back, and the rest is more or less history, of which we're still going. So what is it about these athletes who've been through something very traumatic or very tough, very hard in their early years, then going on to be mega, mega successful in sport? There's so much to unpack, and it's very hard to measure the exact reasons why this has that impact on these young athletes, but there's so much about it that I feel it comes down to generating this need as opposed to a want. So I myself had a very privileged, safe, happy upbringing as a child, very supportive family unit, very safe upbringing, very happy upbringing, and swimming was my absolute passion. It was all I did growing up. It was, you know, my thing that I wanted to do. I was desperate to go to the Olympics. I wanted it so badly. It was my dream, but I didn't need it. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's one of these things that we see among these athletes, is it's the difference between wanting it, wanting to be the best, wanting to go to an Olympics, and literally needing it with your entire being. And that's what I believe the difference is. You know, take a Michael Phelps who may have really struggled at school, really struggled to make friendships and really struggled to find where he belonged. And then he finds something he's good at, something that he can even be the best at. The drive within him, and as well, he also has that amazing, perfect physical build for the sport that he found, but that drive within him where this is his everything, this is the thing that he gets to be the best at, that he's better than anyone else at, the drive within him versus someone who hasn't had a struggle growing up, who fits in at school, who finds, you know, learning, you know, easy as anyone else, and doesn't have issues with friendships, doesn't have issues at home. It's a very different scenario. Someone who wants to go to training every day to get away from their home situation, and that's the place where they're happiest, where they're safest. Again, it's different from someone whose mum is just taking them back and forth to training every day. Very interestingly, along these same lines, I met up with a coach a few years ago, a coach who I worked with when I was sort of in my teen years, and he ended up moving to another nation as the national coach. And it's a nation that is very well known for being mega successful, and they also have had a lot of controversy with illegal substance use within sport. And I bumped into him a few years ago, and we had a chat and we were just catching up, and I was asking all about the nation he was coaching now. And he was explaining to me that while they have had this history of many athletes within their system having tested positive for banned substances, what he sees as a coach over there is very different to what he saw when he was coaching in the UK. And that is this desperate need to get out of their personal circumstances. And he sees that a lot within these athletes. It's a very tough environment that they live in, that they work in, and that created these athletes who would, he was saying there was never a complaint or, an issue or even a thought that they didn't want to do something or they didn't want to push themselves. And he just said it was just this different level within them where they would do anything it takes, literally anything you ask of them, they're going to do it and more, with no questions asked. And that is the same of any elite athlete. You don't get to be an elite athlete without working hard, but it was just something different in this nation that he was working that came from the tough circumstances of these athletes and the fact that they needed this success to get out of the situations that they were in as young people and to give themselves more freedom and more of a future with choices. That was what he was seeing in this other nation. And again, that kind of comes back to that extra drive and it being a need to succeed versus a want and a dream and a desire, this desperate need to be successful. And it's the only thing you have and it's what you are clinging on to because the rest of your life might not be so sunshine and roses. It could be that it's an escape, it's a way out. It could be that it's the only place you feel safe. It could be that it's the only environment within that you feel in control or that you feel that you can be good at or successful at. But that's what we were seeing so frequently was the difference between an elite athlete and a super athlete. It was some kind of reason that they needed it more. So why do we call Simone the GOAT? Why does she call herself the GOAT? She's actually caught, some criticism for being arrogant or big-headed and that she needs to be more humble. But does she? I don't know if she does. She has said herself, it's a fact. Why should she not say, I'm the greatest gymnast there has ever been, when it's a stone cold fact? Do you want her to lie? I don't know. She is, without doubt, on paper, she has won the most medals. She has the most skills named after her. 5 skills. Is that right? I had to check my notes because that doesn't sound right. So what this means, 5 eponymous skills. I hope that's the correct phrase, but this means that she is the first gymnast to perform this skill. So this movement, whatever it is, on the equipment in a competition. She has been the first ever 5 times to perform certain skills in this current age. You think how much gymnastics, how many years of gymnastics have gone before her, how many phenomenally talented gymnasts have gone before Simone, that 5 times no one has done what she's done skill-wise on the equipment ever before her. That is unbelievable. She has won 37 Olympic and World Championship medals. 37. That's mind-blowing. And she's still going. She's still going. When will it end? We don't know, but everyone else is hoping it's going to be soon, so they might have a chance. So let's have a look at Simone's journey. So as I said, age 6, she sort of tried gymnastics for the first time. And then aged 14, she actually started training at an elite level. So in London 2012, she didn't go to the Olympics. That was a little too soon for her. In 2012, she'd only been doing gymnastics 9 years. And while she was already starting to make that crossover from sort of junior level gymnastics into the senior international realm. She wasn't ready. She was still too young, too inexperienced to qualify for the London 2020. What? She was still a little too young. She was still a little too green to qualify for London 2012. So her first Olympic Games was Rio in 2016. And this is where she really stormed into like the public eye. You know, before Rio, did people in the gymnastics world know her name, know of her? Of course, absolutely. But people outside of that hadn't really fully got her on their radar yet. And then in 2016 in Rio, she was one of the stars of the games. 4 golds, 1 bronze she came home with at her first Olympics. Not bad. And still only 19 years old. And then in the years between Rio and Tokyo, which should have been the 2020 Olympics, but ended up a year later, more on that in a moment, she won everything. She was unbeatable for like that entire 4/5 year period. She was on fire. So of course, when Tokyo was coming around, she was it. She was all over. She was the poster child of those games. We were all waiting. I was so excited to see Simone at the Tokyo Olympics. It was going to be one of the highlights of the games for me, getting to see her win absolutely everything. How many golds could she win? We don't know. Probably all of them, unfortunately for everybody else. But Tokyo was no regular schmegular Olympics, was it? Tokyo was the COVID Games. It was delayed by a year. And as Simone said in her documentary, she thought, her whole assumption, her whole life, this was going to be her games. This was going to be the last games that she expected she would ever get to do. She should have been 23 at the games, but because it was delayed by a year because of COVID, she was 24. And that, although clearly still a spring chicken in the regular world, at the Olympics and particularly within gymnastics, that's like an old lady. So she was very much going into Tokyo thinking this is going to be the peak of her career. This is going to be it. This is her time to shine. Maybe in Rio, although she did pretty well, she was still quite young. She still hadn't hit the absolute best she could be. She still had more to come. Whereas Tokyo, she very much felt like this is it. I'm in the absolute prime of my life. I'm injury free. I've got all of these skills, and she was ready to go and smoke everybody out, and she was on fire. And then initially they get delayed by a year. That's problem number 1. And I know that might be hard to fully understand if you're not an athlete or you've never trained for an Olympics or done an Olympic cycle, with that being the goal at the end, to understand what that does. But that was utterly catastrophic for the vast majority of athletes. That additional year, you know, a 4-year cycle of training, 4 years to get to an Olympic Games in the perfect condition, everything, every single day for those 4 years, breaking yourself, your soul, your body, blood, sweat and tears every single day for 4 years, just to be told, we're going to make it an extra year. And an athlete like Simone, I know Adam Peaty, the swimmer, the British swimmer, he also had this same despair at this moment, because that was also going to be his final games, and that was the plan, and he was training every day and struggling and just trying to make it to the end of this 4-year cycle. And you know, again, he was also sort of aging out of the sport and at his peak, only to say, you're going to have to wait and train and break yourself and more blood, sweat and tears for another year. That was extremely tough, extremely rough. And it was devastating, very, very hard to get yourself back up mentally to say, we're going to do this for another year. That was really hard, really tough on these athletes. So that undoubtedly had an impact on everybody. And let's not forget that Simone was also a victim of Larry Nassar. That was this whole extremely agonizingly painful and really shameful for sport period of time when all of that case came out and Simone spoke up about it and spoke up about her experiences. That all happened, that all came out, that all went down in between those 2 Olympic cycles, between Rio and Tokyo. Everything, the truth about Larry Nassar came out, and Simone in 2018 spoke up and said that she was a victim. She had been a victim of Larry Nassar. So that cycle was just not your average Olympic cycle for anybody, but especially not for those gymnasts who were victims of Larry Nassar. That was just an absolutely brutal few years for Simone, who already in her life has been through so much. But that cycle, having that extra year, having all of that build up, all of that work and everything she went through during that court case and all of the testimonials and all of that coming out into the public, an incredibly tough, painful few years for her going into Tokyo. And then she gets to Tokyo, and Tokyo, as I said, was no regular games. We'd already had that additional year added on to the cycle that made it so tough. But when we get there, everything is different. Everything is weird. You aren't allowed any family to come with you. There are no crowds. They had to wear masks. You can see Simone in the arena with a mask on. And I think, imagine the stress of that. Imagine, I try to think about being in an athlete's shoes when you're nervous, when you're stressed, when your anxiety is at its peak, when you're physically pushing yourself, and then you're having to put a mask on. A lot of sporting arenas are also always very warm, particularly a swimming pool in that environment, and having a mask on, I can already feel myself feeling claustrophobic, feeling my anxiety rising just at the thought of that. It was a bizarre environment to be in Tokyo. It was so different to a regular games. There was no socializing. They were having to have daily COVID tests, and you knew that at any second, if you get COVID, your Olympics is over. They were staying in their rooms. They were isolated. There was no support system there. Very minimal amount of people were allowed to travel with the team. So all her regular team and support system and family were not allowed to come. It was a very isolating, strange and scary games with even more pressure than usual, because they were probably all living with a constant fear and terror of a positive test and boom, your games is over. No crowds, very bizarre, very quiet environment compared to what they usually would have been competing within. So the entire environment, the entire years leading up to that competition would have felt different, would have felt strange. She had this unbelievable amount of pressure and expectation on her. She had also gone through so much personally, and then she was in this really alien, scary environment. It was a huge amount of extra. You know, there's always pressure on successful athletes, particularly Olympic Games, but add all that extra strangeness and isolation and fear on top of everything that she'd been through. Why was anyone surprised it went how it did? So what exactly happened in Tokyo? Well, Simone still came away with a silver and a bronze, which is not too shabby for literally 99.99% of the human population. But for Simone, that was an utter disaster. And what she says happened is that she got a terrible case of the twisties. Now, I had never heard of the twisties before Simone had a severe case of them in Tokyo, and I'm going to try and explain it in my layman non-gymnast terms. So the twisties, now here's the thing about the twisties. A gymnast who's twirling, spinning through the air, somersaulting every which way, apparently, usually they actually know where they are in the air. It's unfathomable to me that any gymnast ever knows where they are when they're doing, you know, I watch a lot of gymnastics. Not only do I watch all the competitions on TV because I just love it, but my daughter does gymnastics. She's not an elite level. She's already too tall. She's already taller than Simone Biles. She's 10. So she physically was never going to be a natural gymnast, but she just loves it and she does a sort of amateur level gymnastics. But she trains in the same gym as all of the, you know, elite gymnasts that they have at her club. And so I watch gymnastics for hours every week, okay? And I am always confused how they physically have any idea how to make their body do these things, and how they know where they are, what direction they're going in is amazing to me. It's mind-blowing. The skill and the difficulty of the sport is incredible. So apparently, usually gymnasts, they know where they are, they can sort of, you know, they can spot the floor, they know when it's coming, they know when to land, they know what direction they're going in and twisting their body. When you experience the twisties, which is a psychological phenomena that is well known within the gymnastics community, and actually several of Simone's teammates in her Netflix documentary talked about having the twisties themselves and what it feels like, and it is terrifying. What this means is usually when an athlete is doing, you know, I don't know, a triple somersault off the pommel. What's she talking about? I don't know. But when Simone is, say, doing, you know, a very complicated vault, and she knows exactly I'm here, I'm twisting, and boom, and I've landed, she has suddenly no idea where she is. She can't tell what direction, she can't tell whereabouts in the movement. She feels completely lost in the air. That's how it was described by Simone and her teammates who have suffered from this. And Beth Tweddle did a great job of explaining this throughout the Tokyo Games when we were talking about how Simone had withdrawn and that she was suffering from the twisties. Simone shared some video footage of her in training where she was trying to like practice her routines for the games, and she was just falling like flat on her face because she had just lost her orientation essentially in the air. And she got absolutely ripped to pieces. In the media and on social media by everyone. She was getting racially abused and just absolutely trolled to pieces because she was suffering from this condition within gymnastics that made it unbelievably dangerous for her to continue to compete. She was trying and training to see if she could make it back in time to help out and to still do one of her events and at least salvage something. But this isn't like running or swimming, okay? You know, you're having a bad day in the pool, you might not come away with a medal, you might do a really bad time, but you're not going to land on your head from 10 feet in the air. You know what I'm saying? This is the thing about gymnastics. Even if you don't have the twisties, you're having the best day of your life, it can still end in broken legs, dislocations, or even something much, much worse, paralysis or even death. And all of the coaches and the experts that work within gymnastics were saying, you know, this could literally end in her being killed. If she was to go out there and try and do the routines, the difficulty and the danger without the twisties that are involved in what Simone usually does, without doubt, she could end her entire career or worse. So it was absolutely the right thing that she said, I can't continue in the competition. She's not able to do it. It wasn't that she was scared. I'm sure she was scared. It wasn't that she was feeling a lot of pressure, although she obviously was feeling a lot of pressure. She was going to put those things to one side. What she couldn't put to one side was the complete inability to do any of the routines and to do them safely. It wasn't like she just wasn't going to do her best. It was that she was going to risk her life and her entire future if she was to try to do this while she was suffering from the twisties. And let me tell you, no Olympic athlete, certainly not an Olympic athlete like Simone, who was at what she thought was going to be her last Olympic Games, at the peak of her career. She had trained her entire life and the last 5 years specifically for this moment. I promise you, she didn't just go, I don't want to. It's too much. That's not what happened. If she physically could have done it, I promise you, she would have. No athlete at the Olympics who's going for gold medals is just going to call it a day because it's a bit hard or because they're feeling the pressure. But it's very easy for Dave from Leicester to sit in his armchair and mock her and rip her to pieces when he clearly doesn't have a single shred of a clue what he's talking about. So that was utterly devastating, crushing, soul destroying. She had gone to Tokyo with these dreams and these expectations, and what she was thinking was going to be like the culmination of her entire career coming down to this moment and this absolute glory time that she should have and could have had, only to have to walk away from it all and go home almost, certainly in her realm, empty-handed. And she was embarrassed and she was getting bullied and humiliated online. And she felt like she was the laughingstock of gymnastics. And I just can't even imagine the devastation. She had this closet at home, and I know this feeling on a much lower level, that she had all of her Olympic stuff, her kit, everything that she took, all of her leotards and everything in this closet in her home, that she can't even look at it without, you know, just pain and all of those memories coming back. I too have a box of stuff like that I can't look at, that breaks my heart with the memories and all of that stuff. And I can't imagine how devastating that must have been. And she thought that was it. You know, she's going to be too old come the next Olympics. That's it for me. And that's how my unbelievable career has now finished. And it was heartbreaking, devastating. So she actually took like 18 months, I think she said, where she just didn't go near a gym. And this is unbelievable when you think about it, to think that she was able to take 18 months off and then come back and be like, I'll give it a go. And she's back. She's back to her absolute best. What? It's just not fair, is it? It's just not fair. The other gymnasts, when they heard she'd retired, they must have been beside themselves to then hear 18 months later, a year out from the next Olympics, that she's decided to give it another go. Why? So she told us in her documentary, she got back in the gym in 2023, okay? A year before the Olympics in Paris. She was starting to feel like, maybe I do want to go back to the gym. And she started off just dipping a toe. Literally, her teammates were saying, you know, she'd come in one day and she'd just sort of play around. She started off just playing around on the trampoline, much safer than trying things on the floor, and she would just do a couple of bits and she wouldn't feel so great. She'd still have the twisties because they don't just go away by themselves. And it seems like one of these things where once you've had it, it's always possible that it's just going to rear its ugly head again. It's one of these things, if you've never had it, it's probably not going to come, but once you've had it, it's never going to leave you alone, and it's going to haunt you forever, that it could come back at any moment. And that's what was happening for Simone. So she would get back in the gym, she'd have a couple of days where she would feel good, she'd feel fine, and then it would come back again and she couldn't do anything again. And she'd go away for a week, or she'd take a few days off, and then she'd come back, and then they wouldn't see her for a month. And then she'd come back a couple of days and she'd be gone again. And it took months for her to actually say, I'm going to take it seriously, I'm coming in every day. And she decided that she was going to go for it, and with a goal of getting back into the best shape of her life. Now at 27 years old, for Paris 2024, she was going to give it her best. She was going to take it seriously. She was going to get back into proper training, and she was going to go for it and see what she could do. And boy, is she back. In the 2023 World Championships, when she'd literally only been back in the gym for a few months, she came away with 4 golds and a silver. And she's also been doing more new skills. I mean, it's just mind-blowing how phenomenal and rare she is. She's just unreal, untouchable. Undoubtedly the greatest of all time. So she did have a couple of little stumbles at the World Champs, and then at the Olympic trials, she also did have a couple of little what's happening? Is everything okay? At trials, she came first in the all-around, 4th on beam, 1st on the floor, and 2nd on bars. So it seemed like she may have slightly struggled at trials, but she obviously qualified in everything. And she had a couple of little stumbles at World Champs. She has said herself, she still gets the twisties. They still come and go every now and then. She's kind of learning to work with them, and she's learning to sort of work around it and do what she can. But what's going to happen in Paris? It is absolutely possible, unfortunately, that we're going to see a potential repeat, certainly on some level, of what we saw in Tokyo, where with the additional pressure and the stress and the environment and everything else that comes with it, it could go the same as it went in Tokyo. I'm absolutely praying and wishing and hoping that it doesn't, because I felt, not that it was her fault, I want to be clear, but I felt so robbed in Tokyo of Simone. All I wanted was to see her destroying everybody else. I know that's probably not very patriotic to say. I should be like rooting for the GB team, which of course I am, but I just love unbelievable performance. I just love athletes who are just amazing at what they do. I love to see it. And she undoubtedly deserved and should have won everything in Tokyo. And I wanted to see it. I wanted to see her just destroy everybody. I wanted to see what she could do. I wanted to see it. And I felt so sad and robbed of seeing her at her best, you know? And the fact that we now get another chance where that could potentially, we could see that again, I am so excited, and I'm just praying and crossing everything that for her, she gets her time in the sun. She still has somehow, against all odds, maintained the talent and the skill level. In fact, she's probably taken it up somehow another notch since Tokyo, which is unbelievable. At 27 years old, an Olympic gymnast, to be at that peak level of winning golds everywhere she goes is very unusual. Okay, she expected to retire 3 years ago. 4 years ago, in fact, if Tokyo had actually happened in 2020. She thought she was going to be done by now. 4 years later, she's still going. And not only is she still going, she's not just going and she's doing a couple of things here, a couple of bronzes. She's still going and expected to win everything. She's still coming up with new skills that nobody has ever been able to do before. It's unbelievable. So what do I think is going to happen in Paris? I'm nervous. I'm worried. I desperately want her to get to go and do what she does and to show what she can do. That's all I want for her. She deserves it. She has worked years and years and years to get this. She didn't get to have that moment in Tokyo. I'm praying and wishing and sending all of my happy, healthy, non-twisty vibes as much as I can to her. It's all we want for her. We want her to come out and dominate and do what she can do, which is what no one else can do. I want to see all of that good stuff in Paris. There is without doubt a risk and a chance that it's going to happen again, that the twisties are going to just come for her again. And I wish I could just beat them back and take them myself, because I never know where I am. I could take them, give them to me. I'm fine. I trip over a lot anyway. So, you know, let me have them. Leave Simone alone. In my mind, I'm positive thinking she isn't going to get them. They're going to leave her alone and everything is going to come together and it's going to be the absolute happy ending that she deserves, and that she gets to walk away from this bonus games that she didn't think she was ever going to be at, with all of her dreams come true. That's what I'm praying for. Of course, there's a risk now that she's had the twisties and that they are coming and going for her still in training and at competitions at times. I just pray that she's safe. I pray that she gets through everything without any injury and that she's able to have her happy ending to her absolute glistening career of dreams. Do I think this is going to be her last games? Yes, 100% I do. Not only because by the next games in LA, she would be 31. It is going to be tempting because it's a home games. And that is so special to athletes. It is an absolute dream to be at home games, okay? Even for me, working at the London Olympics in 2012 was a dream, let alone actually getting to go and your entire friends and family and everyone you know, and it being a home crowd. That is an absolute dream for an athlete. So it's tempting, but I think given that she was sort of hanging on these last, 4 years, because especially after what happened in Tokyo, because she thought that was going to be her last games, I fully expect this to be her last games. So I hope for us that we get to see her shine like she should and like she can and like we all wish for her to be. And I hope and pray for her that she gets to go out on the absolute peak at these games. I think she may carry on for maybe more competitions, maybe more world champs. Whether she'll carry on for 4 more years to another Olympics, I don't think she will. I think this will be her last games. Not only is it the psychological and the physical toll, she's also now married. That's something else that happened, something positive that happened between Tokyo and now, is that she got married. She's 27. For so many female athletes who are sort of coming towards that age in their life, they missing out on starting a family at the time they would have wanted to. Maybe she wanted to do that after Tokyo, maybe she wanted to do that after she got married, she wanted to start a family. I don't know if she did or not, but if she does, hanging on for another 4 years to do that, to start that next part of her life, is going to be extremely tough and extremely hard. It's a lot to ask, and it's a lot for her to want to do. You know, she's sacrificed enough. She's sacrificed for 27 years of her life, everything else, for the sake of gymnastics. So I really feel like at this age, at this time in her career, she probably is wanting desperately to move on to that next stage of her life and do something else, and what comes after sport, which is my area of expertise. And I see it a lot. It really starts once, you know, female athletes get towards the mid-20s, they are itching to move into that next phase of their life a lot of the time. And I'm sure she is, particularly because it was delayed for longer than she thought. But the other thing is injury. The older we get, the longer we've been doing a sport at the level that Simone is, particularly when it is such a tough sport on your body. There is so many tough landings, strain on joints, strain on muscles, and body in general is just the absolute maximum that it can be really of any sport. And the older we get and the more times we've landed on ankles and, you know, put strain on knees and shoulders. She's already had at least one surgery that we know of, and she's already had a couple of injuries that we know of, including a shoulder injury. So it's very hard. The longer and the older that we get, and the longer that you do these strenuous movements every single day of your life to the level that she is, with the impact on her body, she's going to pick up more and more injuries as she gets older and as she continues to do it. It's just the maths, the number of repetitions of things. It's going to get harder and harder for her to stay injury free, and for her to have completed this career without any major injuries is, again, unbelievable. That's incredibly impressive and unusual, you know, for her to have never had a really major injury that in any way has affected her performance is really amazing. So again, if she could get to Paris injury-free, healthy, twisty-free, and give us the absolute best that she has to give, which is more than anyone else has ever given us, then I think it would be an amazing time for her to say, do you know what, I'm not going to put my body at risk anymore. It's time for me to move on to the next period of my life. She cannot possibly do any more. She's done more than enough. So I think we should all enjoy Simone at Paris 2024 with the knowledge that this may well and is quite likely to be the last time we see her at an Olympics. And I, for one, cannot wait to see what she does, because she's unbelievable. She's without question the GOAT, the greatest of all time. So there you have it. Those are all of my thoughts on one of my all-time favourite athletes, the unbelievable Simone Biles. What do you guys think of her? Are you as obsessed and impressed and in awe of her as I am? What are your thoughts on what happened in Tokyo? What are your thoughts on athletes and having some kind of tough upbringing or tough childhood events influencing or impacting their drive and their success in sport? Do you see the link? Do you understand it? Do you have any experience of this? Please let me know all of your thoughts on everything we discussed today in this very different for me type of video. Do you want to hear more of my thoughts and experience within sport? What do you think? Let me know everything that you are thinking in my comment section down below. But I hope you enjoyed this video and found it interesting, and I would love to see you in the next one. Otherwise, take care for now. Bye 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 bye.